Last week, we explored vulnerability through the lens of what can get in the way of allowing us to be vulnerable, and how being vulnerable helps us meet the basic human need of connecting with one another. This week, we're going to twist the kaleidoscope just a little bit and explore trust and how it connects to vulnerability and how we can build trust with others and ourselves. Leadership coach Charles Feltman says that trust is choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. And what we know is that trust, especially for the big things, builds slowly. You don't just walk up to someone and tell them your closest hope or deepest secret. John Gottman, a researcher on relationships, talks about sliding door moments. This is the idea that trust is built in very small moments. In every interaction, he says, there's a possibility of connecting or of turning away from someone. He shares this story as an example of a sliding door moment. He was near the end of a novel and anxious to find out who the killer was. He was headed to the kitchen, but eager to come back to his book. And as he walked past the bathroom, he noticed his wife looked sad as she was brushing her hair. It was a sliding door moment. He could pretend he hadn't seen her, or he could talk to her. He chooses to talk to her. Trust is built in small moments of connection. Brené Brown describes this kind of building trust as filling a metaphorical marble jar. When someone starts building trust with you, they can become a marble jar friend. The idea came out of a conversation with our daughter. So if I ask my friend Shelly to help me out in some small way, and she does, I might put a marble in the marble jar. Or I tell a small secret to a friend and he never tells someone else. A marble in the marble jar. The marble jar illustrates that it is in the small moments of connection and care that trust is built between two people. We're going to spend a few minutes of what I like to call a worship experience. In that time, we're going to collectively fill up a marble jar, or maybe even two, with those small moments. When I invite you, those who are interested can come up and share just one word that reminds you of the moment when someone put a marble in your trust jar. And this isn't time for a whole story, although you're welcome to share that with people later at social hour. Just one word. And then I invite you to take one of our marbles and put it in this jar. And we can do this until we run out of marbles or volunteers. I'm going to start with the online folks. Please either raise your hand as you do for joys and concerns, and you can say one word when you're called on, or you can put it in chat. And this can be a first name of a person or a topic, like Shelly or sandwich, that represents the moment of trust building. Just gonna check with the online folks. Cindy. And Lisa, go ahead.
Listening.
Listening. Okay. I'm going to give you another moment. Flowers. Hug. Okay. Laura?
Safety.
Thank you. Safety, okay. I'm switching back and forth between chat and participants, so thank you all for catching that. Loyalty, community. Okay. I'm now going to invite anyone who would like to in the sanctuary or in the building, also trueness, to come forward. And Carol will hold the microphone and you can say your name or your topic and put a marble in our marble jar. One name or a topic, one word.
Dishwasher.
Commiserating.
Speechless.
Comforted.
Support.
Relief.
Listening.
Starbucks.
Sharing.
Conchas.
Laughter.
Loving.
Dinner.
See, I bet you're taking note of some of those words to ask more later. Trust is built in small moments. When someone fills up their metaphorical marble jar with us, then we know this is someone with whom we can share deep, vulnerable stories. We all need marble jar friends. We need people we can trust to respond with compassion and empathy, even when we're feeling scared or ashamed. And as we discussed last week, vulnerability is risky. There may be times when someone we trust betrays us. We share a personal story and they share it with someone else. They tell us we were foolish for doing something or imply that by telling us all that, they would have done differently instead of just being present with our story. Yes, sometimes marbles get removed from the marble jar. Maybe that's the end of the marble jar friendship, but maybe enough marbles are left that trust can be rebuilt. Remember, trust is choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. And I also believe this applies to our relationship to ourselves. We build the trust in ourselves in small moments, times of observing what we ourselves do when something important is at stake. If we can't count on ourselves, how can we ask others to trust us? How can we ask others to give us something we don't believe we are worthy of receiving? So how do we build trust with one another and with ourselves? What makes these small moments possible? Brene Brown came up with the acronym BRAVING, B-R-A-V-I-N-G. As she says, because when we trust, we are braving connection with someone. So I want to spend some time with you today exploring that acronym. Board members, you might remember a little bit of this because we talked about it several months ago. As we looked at each of the components of braving, consider your marble jar moments, times when your trust in someone has increased. And think about whether any of these components were particularly present in that moment. So the first one is B, which stands for boundaries. Boundaries refer to where I end and the rest of the world, including you, begins. Which tasks and responsibilities are mine to own, and which ones are yours and deserve to be respected as such? Which feelings and emotions are mine to own, and which are yours and deserve to be respected as such? We have limits, and that's okay. I can trust you if you are clear about your boundaries and you hold them, and you're clear about my boundaries and respect them. There's no trust without boundaries. Let's dig into this a little deeper. Do you say no when you need to? Being asked to do something, to get involved with something you don't have the time or even more the desire to or call to do is challenging. And almost all of us have said yes at one time or another when we really wanted to say no. I believe this is very common in our Unitarian Universalist congregations. And I won't ask you to out yourselves, but the laughter might be doing it though. But think about if you've agreed to do something you really didn't want to do. What happens then? Do you do that thing with joy? Or did you feel a little put upon, maybe even a little angry and resentful? I think sometimes we fear that we have to agree to something in order to be liked or respected or to maintain a relationship. But setting boundaries is daring to love ourselves. And it is daring to trust someone else with the truth of our limits, even when we risk disappointing them. In the end, setting and maintaining boundaries for ourselves shows that we can be trusted by others. It gives others permission to have their own boundaries and to be vulnerable and honest about their own limits. And I know for me, at least, how much I appreciate when someone has clear boundaries, because I know if I ask them something, I trust they will only say yes if they can do it without resentment and anger, either at me or themselves. Your no allows me to trust your yes. So that's B for boundaries. Next is R for reliability. Boundaries and reliability are connected. If we take on too much, we can't honor our commitments, and we can't be reliable. To build trust with someone, we need to be able to say what we are going to do and do it over and over. That's a tough one, at least for me. It's important to be reliable, and I know sometimes I'm doing so many other things, I forget about a phone call or an email. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with tasks that it reduces our ability to keep our commitments. But when we make our commitments within the context of healthy boundaries, they're easier to keep. Here in our church setting, we are asked to commit our time, our talent, and our treasure each year. And really, those are the commitments that come into any trusting relationship. Will we reliably share our time with others? Will we reliably share our abilities, our skills, our ideas, our talents with them? Will we reliably share our resources, our treasure. So we have B for boundaries, R for reliability, and next is A for accountability. We can only trust in one another if, when we make mistakes, we are willing to own it, apologize, and make amends. We can only trust one another if, when another person makes a mistake, they are allowed to own it, apologize, and make amends. We even have this in our Covenant of Right Relations we adopted as a Tree of Life community in 2019. We call ourselves to be kind and gracious, understanding our limits and those of others, holding ourselves and each other accountable for our behavior, and seeking reconciliation after a conflict. So we already know about this. And if you're thinking, wait, we have a Covenant of Right Relations? What exactly is that? A copy is hanging on the wall out there over the name tags, or you can reach out to a board member with questions, or hopefully anybody else who was here in 2019, but I won't put them on the spot. I will put the board members on the spot. So we have boundaries, reliability, accountability, and next is V for vault. Vault means we don't share information or experiences that are not ours to share. When we are building trust with another person, we need to know our confidence is being kept. Makes sense, right? What Brene Brown says we don't easily understand is that there's only one door on the vault. If I slide up next to you and say, oh my gosh, did you hear about so-and-so? They lost their job, and I'm pretty sure it was because I've just shared something with you that isn't mine to share or even speculate on. And when we do that kind of sharing, it diminishes the trust that the other person has in us. They see that the door to our vault is not secure. And if it isn't secure for that person's life situation, why would I think it would be secure with things I share? Sharing information about others can make us feel good. And when it comes to sharing negative things, gossip or criticism about people with a friend, that can feel like bonding. It's a relationship built on what Brown calls common enemy intimacy, which it's a quick way to feel connected with another person. But it's a false connection because in the end, it actually decreases trust. And this is something we struggle with at times in our congregation, and probably most congregations. As we've explored, connection with another person is a human need. But gossip backfires as a way to build deep connections, as it just teaches people that we can't be trusted to keep confidences. Okay, so we have boundaries, reliability, accountability, and vault. Don't worry, there won't be a test. The next word in the framework is integrity. As you use integrity, living into our values is extremely important to us. Do we choose courage over comfort? Do we do what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy? Do we practice our values rather than just professing them? This can mean holding boundaries when we need to. It can mean having those challenging conversations. It can mean owning the ways we haven't treated others as people of inherent worth and dignity. It can mean engaging in the Tree of Life right relations process, even when it would be a lot easier and maybe a lot more fun just to trash talk the person we're mad at. Think about the times you've noticed somebody here in our congregation living their values, honoring the interdependent web, creating space for all to be heard, serving with love, sharing honestly. When we witness another person living with integrity, our trust in that person grows. Marbles are added to the marble jar. So we have boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, and integrity. Next up is N for non-judgment. To build trust, we have to be able to be vulnerable, to admit our weakness, to fall apart, and to ask for help when we need it, without being judged by the person we've trusted. This is a tough one. How many of you, and you don't have to raise your hands, are a lot better at offering help than asking for it? Me too. And here's the tricky reality of this. Brené Brown says if you can't ask for help and they cannot reciprocate that, this is not a trusting relationship. You see, if I think needing help would mean something bad about me, if I judge myself for having or showing anything that looks like weakness or vulnerability, then on some level I'm judging others who need help. I may not admit to it or even be consciously aware of it, but I've assigned a different value to the roles of helper and helpee. And it doesn't allow for real reciprocity. Trusting relationships require that both people can give and receive help without judgment. I confess I'm still wrapping my head around that one. And if you're anything like me, it is hard to do. We like being helpers, helping out other people. Several of us have served in helping professions, so our identities are wrapped around helping others. And this is especially true in Unitarian Universalist congregations, where we tend, on the whole, to have a lot of middle and upper class white families and individuals. And in American culture, it is these groups in particular that have been taught they are the helpers, the ones who are going to save those people, the poor, the sick, the hungry, the marginalized, the oppressed. And in some religions, especially some Christian traditions, there's a big emphasis on all people needing help, needing a savior to relieve them of their current or future suffering. But we don't have such an emphasis. We talk a lot more about ourselves as saviors, how we can go out and rescue the world. And that's not necessarily a problem. The world does need help. But if we aren't careful, we can forget that all of us need saving sometimes. We all have needs. Can we ask for help from others? If not, why not? And if we don't, what message are we sending to those who need our help? Reciprocal non-judgment is essential for trusting relationships. Okay, so we had boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment. The final letter in our acronym is G for generosity. And this isn't about money, though we are still in our pledge season. In the Braving acronym, the G refers to generosity of spirit. This is about assuming good intentions. If we have a trusting relationship, I will assume the most generous thing about what you say or do, and I will check in with you. If a person messes up, if they say something offensive or forget something important, I can check in and say, you know, I expected you to call because I had that tough job interview. I felt disappointed when you didn't. And we can have a discussion about that. Because I didn't assume bad intentions. I didn't go behind their back and talk to somebody else about how inconsiderate they are or how they clearly don't care about me. When we have a generous spirit, when we assume good intentions, then we assume the best of a person. and we don't give up on them. We want to approach them about the situation directly. Trusting someone enough to check in about the relationship is an extremely generous gift. So we have boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity as the elements of braving connection, the essential elements required for building trust. Understanding how trust is built also helps us understand what is going on when we aren't feeling like we have a trusting relationship. If I'm struggling to trust someone, I might be able to narrow down what is going on in our experience with one another. Instead of just saying, I don't trust you, I can talk about our accountability issue. Or I can think about whether I'm maintaining my own boundaries. My beloved spiritual companions, imagine what it would feel like to be a part of a community deeply rooted in trust. A place where vulnerability came about easily just because of how people were connecting. May we make this a season of braving such connections in our own personal lives and here at Tree of Life. May we honor our own boundaries and the boundaries of others. May we be reliable, keeping our commitments to share our time, talent, and treasure with one another. May we be accountable, communicating honestly when trust is broken. May we establish a trustworthy vault, sharing only what is ours to share and avoiding gossip so others will know we'll keep their confidence too. May we live lives of integrity, considering how our UU values inform our day-to-day choices. May we respond with non-judgment when others need help from us and when we need help from them. And through it all, may we maintain a generous spirit, assuming the best of ourselves and one another. Blessed be.